kasaysayan at kultura ng Pilipinas. Handa na ba kayo? Handa na kayo? Gayahin ninyo ako. Handa na kami. Ibig ko? Handa na ba kayo? Mahusay. Kung mayroon akong mga larawan na ipakita sa inyo, kaya pasok sa inyong isipan. So narito ang ating pagkala. Sabihin niyo sa akin kung ano ang nakita. Ikaw ba ay sumugot ng barko, dalayat, sakyang pandagat, dagat, pagkatan, mangingisda? So ilan lamang ito sa mga siguro na isip natin sa susunod na lalaman ay sino naman kayo sila. Siya ay si Ferdinand. Siya at Charles. Ano nga ba yung dapat sagot na kalakala? Una, sino si Ferdinand? Pangalawa, bakit mahalaga ang kanyang exhibition sa pagkakalong technique? Katlo, paano nakaabot ang kanyang technique sa atin? Upang matulungan tayo isagot itong ito, nakakuha ako ng isang video mula sa akin. Panoorin.
On September 6, 1522, the Victoria sailed into harbor in southern Spain. The battered vessel and its 18 sailors were all that remained of a fleet that had departed 3 years before. Yet her voyage was considered a success, for the Victoria had achieved something unprecedented, the first circumnavigation of the globe. But this story really begins in 1494, 2 years after Columbus's voyage on behalf of Spain. Columbus's discovery had prompted the Catholic Spanish rulers to turn to the Pope to preempt any claims by Portugal to the new lands. The Pope resolved this dispute by drawing an imaginary line on the world map. Spain had the right to claim territories west of the Divide, and Portugal to the east. Spain and Portugal, the two major seafaring superpowers at the time, agreed to these terms in what came to be called the Treaty of Tordesillas. At the time, these nations had their eyes on the same prize, trade routes to the Spice Islands in today's Indonesia. The spices found there, which were used as seasonings, food preservatives, and aphrodisiacs, were worth many times their weight in gold. But because of Portugal's control over eastern sea routes, Spain's only viable option was to sail west. So when a Portuguese defector named Ferdinand Magellan claimed that a westward route to the Spice Islands existed, King Charles made him captain of the Spanish Armada and gave him all the resources he would need. Along with a share in the voyage's profits, he granted Magellan 5 ships and about 260 men. The crew included a young slave named Enrique, captured by Magellan on a previous journey to Malacca, and Antonio Pigafetta, a Venetian nobleman seeking adventure. On September 20th, 1519, the fleet weighed anchor and headed southwest. After making landfall in what is now Brazil, it proceeded along the coast, exploring any waterway leading inland. They were looking for the fabled passage linking east and west. As the weather worsened, the Spaniards' resentment at having a Portuguese captain escalated. A full-blown mutiny soon erupted, which Magellan crushed with unspeakable cruelty. But his problems were only just beginning. During a reconnaissance mission, Santiago was wrecked by a storm. Then, while exploring a narrow waterway, the captain of the San Antonio took the first opportunity to slip away and sail back home. Magellan pressed forward, and on October 21st, he started exploring the navigable seaway. 27 freezing days later, the 3 remaining ships emerged from what we now call the Strait of Magellan into the Mar Típico. The fleet never expected the new ocean to be so vast. After 98 days at sea, dozens of sailors had succumbed to scurvy and famine. When they finally reached land again, Enrique, the young slave, proved able to communicate with the natives. Their goal couldn't be far. Sailing further west, Magellan was warmly received by Raja Humayun of Cebu. So when the ruler asked him to help subdue and convert the rebellious chief of Mactan, the captain readily agreed. The adventure would be his last. Overconfident and severely outnumbered, Magellan's force was overwhelmed, and the natives' bamboo spears ended the captain's life. Yet the voyage had to continue. Magellan's will specified that Enrique should be freed, but the expedition still needed an interpreter. With his freedom at stake, Enrique is believed to have plotted with the Raja to have about 30 of the Spaniards killed at a feast on the beach. Enrique was never heard from again, but if he ever made it back to Malacca, he may have been the first person to actually circumnavigate the globe. Meanwhile, the survivors burned the Concepcion and proceeded onward. They finally reached the Spice Islands in November of 1521 and loaded up on precious cargo. But they still had to return to Spain. The Trinidad sank shortly after being captured by the Portuguese. The Victoria continued west, piloted by Juan Sebastian Elcano, one of the pardoned mutineers. Against all odds, the small vessel made it back to Spain with a full cargo of cloves and cinnamon, enough to cover the expedition and turn a profit. An obsessive chronicler, Pigafetta described the lands and people they encountered. With the help of a humble slave, he also compiled the world's first phrase book of native languages. His journal is the reason we can tell this story. Magellan's legacy lingers. He had galaxies and space programs named after him. Elcano, too, was celebrated in Spain with a coat of arms and his face on currency and stamps. United by fate, the survivors and the hundreds who sacrificed their lives challenged conventional wisdom and completed a historic journey once thought impossible.
Kasi yan ba kayo sa video na ginawa ng Eskpedisyon? Bigyan natin sila ng tatlong taon. Ang mahalagang impormasyon tungkol kay Ferdinand Magellan, si Ferdinand Magellan ay ipinanganak sa 1400 sa Portugal. So, ibig sabihin, hindi siya Espanyol, siya po ay isang Portuguese. Siya ay namatay sa buong ikadalawang pito ng pagpisa ng 520 sa Cebu. Hindi siya pinayagang maglayag sa Portugal. Lumapit siya sa bansang Spain. Siya ay pinayagan ng 1520 siya at ano mga dahilan ng kanyang pinayagan. Nais na makahanap kado at gusto na din patunayan na maaaring marating asya ang gagamitin ng upang makahanap. Binigyan siya ng Espanya ng lumang barko. Trinidad, Santiago, Victoria, Concepcion, tignan din natin sa mapa, ang ginamit niya ay itong bahagi dito, Atlantic Ocean. Makikita niyo yung bago. Narating niya ang Pilipinas noong 1520. Yun nga lang, dun sa 5 barko, isa lamang ang ito ang ito. Bakit nga ba naging mahalaga ang kanyang expedition? Dahil sa paglalakbay niya, tunay ni Magellan na maaaring marating ang Asya, pagkakalitan ng ito yung unang paglalakbay na nakaikot sa buong. Paano naman ito nakakita? Bago pa man dumating ang mga Espanyol sa Pilipinas, tandaan natin na maunlad na ang Pilipinas. Sabihin, meron na tayong buhay at meron na tayong kultura. Mayaman. Pero naging mahalaga ito. Ito yung panahon kilala natin yung Philippines. Ganun din kilala ang Pilipinas sa Asya at pati sa Europa Kaya nagkaroon ng iba't ibang expedition. Bukan natin sabihin, si ang namuna ng expedition ng Espanya ng 1,500 siya. So I see Ferdinand Magellan. Sunod. Ferdinand Magellan ay isang Portuguese. Ang nag-iisang barko ng pabalik sa expedition ng ay barkong Victoria. Tama o mali? Ang expedition ni Magellan ay kaunang-unang paglalakbay na naikot ang tama. Right? Tama. Ang bili, pwede ni Magellan ay napaslang ng grupo ng napila sa tama. Ang sagot ay napansin ninyo pinanggit ko ang labanan sa mga susunod. Bigyan natin ang mga katanungan ating inilalat kanina at tingnan natin kung kaya na natin. Una, sino si Ferdinand Magellan? Si Ferdinand Magellan ay isang Portuguese na naglayag para sa bansang pinangunahan niya expedition ng 1,500. Bakit mahalaga yung kanyang expedition sa kasaysayan? Yung mahalaga ito dahil una, napatunayan na narating na siya sa pamamagitan. Pangalawa, expedition niya, expedition ni Ferdinand Magellan ay ang pinaglalakbay. Yung tanong natin, paano nakaakit ang kanyang paglalakbay? Bago pa man dumating ang mga Espanya sa tandaan, mayaman na. Naging apekto sa ating laylanin. May pagkikilala sa ating kilala sa Espanya